Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Asad Lalji. On behalf of Avid Learning, welcome to A Tale of Two Metros, Urban Planning Insights from Tokyo and Mumbai. Today's discussion was specially curated to celebrate the publication of 6 metros, urban planning and implementation compared. We're delighted to have with us here Mr. Sirish B. Patel, one of the co-authors of the book, along with the other co-authors, Urmi Kapadia and Jasmine Saluja. One of the metros covered, Tokyo, especially piqued our interest at Avid Learning, and that was the impetus of today's discussion. When Prime Minister Sri Narendra Modi visited Tokyo last year for the Quad Summit, the two countries were celebrating the 70th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations between India and Japan, where he talked about how India's relationship with Japan is that of intimacy, spirituality, cooperation, belongingness, strength, and respect. Tokyo and Mumbai are two prime examples of vibrant urban centers, two of the most densely populated metropolises that, while sharing certain similarities, are equally defined by their unique characteristics. Urban design and planning, infused with elements of community participation, shape the cities into vibrant and inclusive spaces. An epicenter of culture, innovation, and human connection, Mumbai and Tokyo share associations and invaluable lessons about urban planning and community hidden under their bustling exteriors. Since the themes of today are urban planning, design, and architecture, I'm happy to announce that the Indian Architecture, Art, and Design Biennale is being organized by the Ministry of Culture, will be taking place at the nation's capital at the iconic Red Fort from December 9th to December 15th of this year. Earlier this month, I had the honor of anchoring the logo launch and curtain raiser of this Biennale at the National Gallery of Modern Art in Delhi. The 7-day-long Biennale will have 7 themes put together by 7 curators with 7 accompanying exhibitions and 7 publications. This will provide a comprehensive support for the Biennale's artistic and intellectual endeavors. The Biennale is an attempt by the Ministry of Culture to get the art fraternity together. An egalitarian approach was deployed to reach out to artists and students, which resulted in a very impressive turnaround. The Ministry of Culture simultaneously has been institutionalizing art and culture outreach internationally. The National Gallery of Modern Art, our host for today, is the commissioner of the Biennale, and a variety of programs are being held across the NGMAs of Delhi, Mumbai, and Bangalore leading up to the Biennale. So mark your calendars. On the 25th of November, there'll be an event in this very room. To the task at hand, welcome to A Tale of Two Metros, Urban Planning Insights from Tokyo and Mumbai. Our panel of experts include Principal Designer and Partner, Opolis Rahul Gore, Director and Architect, Squareworks LLP, and Co-founder, Squareworks Labs, Katsushi Goto, Founder, Plural, Co-author, 6 Metros, Urmi Kapadia, and our moderator for the evening, Founder, Y3 Design Studios, Chaitanya A. Karnik. At Avid Learning, we strongly believe in collaboration and are proud to present this evening in partnership with Plural and the National Gallery of Modern Art, the NGMA, Mumbai, the Ministry of Culture and Government of India. And before we begin, a special thank you to the Director of the NGMA Mumbai and Bangalore, Nazneen Banu, and the Deputy Director, Shruti Das, for hosting us. To commence, please welcome Founder, Plural, and Co-author, 6 Metros, Urban Planning and Implementation Compared, Jasmine Saluja, who will be presenting and sharing enriching insights from the book. Thank you very much and enjoy this discussion. Over to you, Jasmine.
Very good evening to everybody here. Thank you, Asad, for the wonderful introduction and setting the tone for today's evening. I really extend my thank you note to Avid Learning for giving us this platform, as this is one of our objectives to have discussions with everyone, people in general, about how cities are planned, so that they can actively involve themselves with city planning. It is also a pleasure that this talk is being held at NGMA because when the 4th city was designed, urban design at that time was experienced for the first time here. And today we are again discussing about planning and urban design here. A couple of years from today, a conversation between the 3 authors regarding how to make provisions for affordable housing, especially outside the municipal boundaries of Greater Mumbai, was happening. And a need was felt to understand how megapolises have addressed this issue. And it is at this point that we started researching on metro cities. And over a period of many Tuesday discussions with Mr. Sirish Patel, we shaped up this book and selected the cities which are a part of this book for the discussion. Here today we have only Tokyo and Mumbai. What should we do to make a person's functioning in a city effortless and the city a joy to live in, not only for anybody in particular, but all classes of citizens? In the coming decades, especially in India, India will make a shift from being primarily rural to become more urban. And this is where the book focuses to make conclusions and recommendations for planning of Indian cities and urban extension areas, giving them a new insight into the way emerging cities can be planned. And if relevant, other developing countries can also lean into it. The chosen 6 cities are specially selected because they have a democratic framework. And if we need to learn anything from them, the governance is of prime importance, because it is this system which allows us to engage through policies into city design. Before we dive into what Mumbai is, what we are elaborating about Mumbai and Tokyo, I would like to say that the ethos of the book is expressed very nicely through this quote by Karl Popper. And it is right there on the screen, which talks about from his book, The Open Society and Its Enemies. Land is of prime importance to any city. If there is no land, then no cities can be built upon them. Certain core beliefs which we authors had, it is through this light that we look into any city. And it is best that we put our beliefs up front before we start researching or analyzing any of the cities which we have selected. So I'll just share one of the core beliefs on land with you so that it gives you an idea from what our start point is. In a democratic setup, public land belongs to the people. This is our understanding. And government is a custodian of public land, and they should put this land for public purposes. Unless this mindset is not in place, we won't be able to aspire to make our cities inclusive or sustainable. Pivoted on these thoughts, the book understands the history of each city, how they have evolved, and these becomes our signposts. And through mapping of these signposts on various parameters of land, transit, housing, we move ahead to understand these cities. The methodology adopted in understanding these cities and analyzing them cannot be directly compared, because each city is run by its own set of people. They are culturally rich and historically informed. So they all have a context under the premise which they function. But definitely how they have grown or evolved over a period of time leaves some reflection notes for us. In the case, we see here Mumbai skyline, an emerging skyline. In the background and in the front is the inhabitants of the island when it started shaping up together. And this is Tokyo. This is Tokyo city, and Tokyo metropolis is something which looks slightly different from this. Once it was also addressed as a water city. Now why and where is this water is a mystery which you might learn today. Tokyo was not like this, how you saw in the previous slide, always. It has many waterways and pathways, and in the 1600 century, when it was being visited and it started as a fishing town, Europeans thought that this is an equivalent of Venice that they have found. This was much before it started even functioning as a port city. And it was called Edo at that time. Placing this on a timeline, we see that Edo was a fishing village right from the Middle Ages, but its evolution from Edo to Tokyo happened over multiple natural disasters and calamities like fire, earthquake, tsunami, World War I and II. The development of Tokyo has happened between these time gaps, and the city has constructed, reconstructed, dismantled, and again reconstructed itself multiple times. So this is a best example of how resilient a city can be. And this is not purely because of the wish of the people. There is a system behind this, and that is what made us curious to lean into Tokyo and understand it better. Despite the natural calamities, in 1964, Tokyo hosted the Olympics. And this marked as a development marker for the development of Tokyo as a city itself. A lot of development took place, and this is where Tokyo lost its connection with water itself. Now, this is the most busiest pedestrian crossing in Tokyo. I'm sure most of you are aware about this. But what hides beneath this crossing is a confluence of two major ancient rivers. So all the waterways are hidden below their road system. I'm sure in the panel discussion they'll also solve the mystery of the cherry blossom trees and why the pathways are lined with cherry blossom trees, what happens beneath those pathways. Going back to the timeline, post 64 till 1990 was a phase where Tokyo developed the most and advanced the most. After that was the big recession which Tokyo went through, and it lost a complete decade, as they call it, another blackout phase in the development of Tokyo history. And it did continue for another decade, the aftermath, but they started constructing and building the city yet again. Even the post-tsunami and COVID, Tokyo, with a lag of a year, hosted the next Olympics. It was a dream for Tokyo, and it is a continued dream in their blue and green infrastructural system to get back the river and the relationship with water more engaging with people. Looking at Mumbai at the same time, Mumbai also was a sleepy fishing village much before the Middle Ages and the ancient age. If you have trekked in Sanjay Gandhi Park and you have seen the rock-cut caves, they were in the ancient age. After this, in Mumbai, it continued to function under different Maharajas, but later the Portuguese ruled it for 127 years, and it became a British colony for almost 300 years. So the development of Mumbai, as we see, or Bombay initially, did start with a lag of 400 years, and it was again a disease which caused or which initiated mindful planning in Mumbai, and that was the plague. This is how Mumbai looked. The starting point for both the cities were in 1600s, and both cities had a deep relationship with water. And this relationship with water, in order for development, has evolved and changed over a period of time. The reclamation, which was initiated when Mumbai was a British colony, continued till 1880s, and the entire island city was formed by reclaiming in between areas between these islands. In terms of demographics, Tokyo metropolis is much larger a city as compared to Mumbai. What we see or experience most of the time is Tokyo city, and the other half is the Tama region, which makes put together, it makes the Tokyo metropolis. Mumbai is comparable in terms of land with Tokyo city, and in terms with population and density. That's where the two images which you saw earlier, kind of the densities look very similar in both these images. While keeping in mind the timeline and how the population has changed in Tokyo, we'll realize that the development of Tokyo, which took place after 64, during the first Olympic when they hosted, after that the population almost reached a plateau. So the city was being planned with a known number in hand. And before that, the numbers kept on changing, and the impact of various disasters and the change in the population can be seen very clearly here. Mumbai at the same time has evolved very dramatically. I would say the bar graph shows the population increase, and the blue line, the top blue line, shows the growth rate. You can clearly see during independence the peaks, and during the Spanish flu the dips in the graph. It is only now in this last decade, because the 2021 census is yet to be published, we can already see that Mumbai's population is reaching a plateau. And now is the time when we can anticipate the exact population within the city. We know how much migration rate is there, and we have the natural growth rate has even reduced from the national growth rate. What does it all have to do with planning, the population, and the way history has shaped the city? In Tokyo, the urban planning system is very different from what we have in Mumbai. Tokyo functioned as a top-down planning system till the time of World War II. They took a drastic step of changing their entire planning process post World War II. Tokyo is headed by a governor, and it is divided into two primary parts, like the Tama region and the Tokyo city. And the middle governance was completely collapsed post World War II, but it became effective after the lost decade. And the entire power to design the city and to take decisions was happening at the ward levels. Like we have electoral wards in Mumbai, and we all know which ward we belong to. The local scale planning was happening at the ward level, and it was contextual, and every 4 years the planning could be revised. And this was coterminous with the mayor who was heading your ward. And the mayor is an elected mayor, and so the voices of the people is taken ahead, and they are involved in the planning system. An area as small as 6 kilometers or as large as the entire city is planned together, and different land uses based on your needs are put together, and the district plan itself is designed with the community participating in it. Something which really interested us was the ordinance which could be held up in the court of law, which is called Makizuruki. And here what happens is that the community looks into the qualitative aspects of planning, and they work like they draft their own policies, and they can discuss with the mayor, and they can even take that to court. We look into Mumbai now. Mumbai has administratively 4 different zones, which are administratively monitored, and they are used for voting and election purposes, and even putting together the supply system. But when it comes to physical planning happens only as a single tier, which is the city level. There is no involvement of people in terms of planning, or no contextual planning. Once in every 20 years, people get a chance to make suggestion or objection, but the direct involvement is not into planning. And it is FSI that governs the way buildings or larger areas are planned, rather than the context in which these buildings sit. Impact of when citizens get involved into planning, and when the city frequently is exposed to disasters, how do you house everybody in that city? This is quite a challenge. We can see the shortage of housing in our city today. But Tokyo, this graph shows the housing which was built in each decade, and the light green color shows the people who are living in rented housing and the people who owned housing, and the darker blue shows the vacant houses. All put together, it makes the housing stock. You can see right in 1973, this is post the first Olympics, that was the time when major development was happening, the housing stock of the city is more than the households in the city, which means that they have more supply of houses, including affordable housing, than the number of households living. This is something absolutely unique to all the 6 metros that we have studied. The public participation process and no shortage of housing. This is a unique aspect of, especially in an Asian city. And this trend has continued since 1973, and the figures show of 2015. The rental market has shown an upward trend throughout these years, which shows the nature in which people live, and it shows how affordability is converted into dwelling units, where people do not have the capacity to buy, but they have a capacity to rent and live in these spaces. Because there is adequate supply, the steady housing prices are maintained throughout the decades. Now the shift or the challenge which Tokyo has in terms of housing is not the quantum, but the quality of housing. Tokyo is also a city, and Japan as a country itself is aging very fast. 1 in 10 people are above the age of 80 years in Japan. So how housing can be made safe for the elderly is one of the goals for Tokyo. And when people cannot move further or long distances, how amenities can be bring together along with housing. To meet the climate changes, the housing goals are defined to meet energy and also how they perform during a disaster. So this is a departure from other cities where we are still struggling to match up the count. Again, if we see in the different statistics, although there is adequate housing, the average family size in Tokyo is very close to 2, which means that in each household there are 2 or less people. Whereas in Indian cities, we have almost 5 living in a house of 4.5. The minimum housing unit is 25 square meters. That is what is offered for SRA redevelopment as well. But a household size of 2 people gets the minimum housing for 40 square meters in Tokyo. So the issue which Bombay is dealing, besides the shortage, is about overcrowding within the housing units. It is not about how dense the city is, because both cities are equally dense. If you see the tenements, which means the number of housing per hectare, is similar in both the cities. This has also come as a move where the entire housing is planned, and the unplanned proportion of housing is not there in Tokyo. This also means that if we look onto the graph on the right, housing is self-built or is mostly privately built in both the cities. It is matter of the quality of housing and what kind of resources are given. If it is planned, the quality of housing is much higher. But if it is unplanned, yet it is privately built, even though we call it as a slum today, it is still a privately built house, and that is where the quality is compromised. Another trend which I mentioned earlier was the percentage of population living in rented housing. So that is something which is a policy level intervention which can really support affordable housing in Mumbai. Looking at these aspects of quality of life for all the social classes, what we have seen today is a demonstration of governance, planning process and housing. The book dwells into 10 different aspects, which says that housing alone cannot give you a good quality of life. It needs affordable transit, it needs amenities, you should be able to walk to your school, you should have hospitals nearby, open spaces. In London, open spaces have become post-COVID a precautionary line of health. So in which light each aspect is seen in a different metropolis shows how much of resource building has happened in that. I will leave on this slide because the panel will be reflecting on these different aspects in two different cities from their own personal experiences, their lived experience in each city, and will let us know how they impact the everyday life within Tokyo and within Mumbai. At this point, I would like to invite Mr. Suresh Patel. Many of you know him already who are sitting here. He is an urban planner and a civil engineer, and he is also one of the 3 original authors for the idea of Navi Mumbai. Its formation and seeing it through in the first 5 years has shaped Navi Mumbai during that time. He is extremely active in his writing and petitions on urban planning policies and city matters.
Good evening. There are a number of recommendations we've made in our book, and I would like to focus on just one. We've said that governance in Mumbai should be at 2 levels. In Tokyo, it is at 2 levels. At the lower level, they have something which they call machi zukuri. And it's a form of community development control where the local authority makes all the big decisions concerning that locality. But can you imagine in Mumbai, instead of an ordinance coming out of Mantralaya, you have an ordinance coming out of Kolaba. It applies only to Kolaba. Or an ordinance coming out of Fort, which applies only to Fort. But both these are justiciable. You can go to a court of law and have these ordinances enforced. I'd just like to know how this works in Tokyo. How do you actually pass an ordinance at the local level which the courts can enforce? That's my question to the panel. Thank you.
Good evening. I think in the interest of time, we should speed along. Everyone here has some connection with Tokyo. Everyone here feels very strongly and passionately about Mumbai, where we are. We are going to try to answer your questions, sir. I hope that comes up in the panel discussion. And we're all architects, so that colors this conversation a little bit. What I'd like to do is that presentation ready? What I'd like to do is, I'm going to ask Rahul to just talk about his work and how it relates to this conversation today.
Yeah, hi. I'm a practicing architect in Mumbai, but I had the opportunity of spending a full year in Tokyo as a Bunkacho scholar. That's as a representing IIA. And it was a completely, it was a very influential part of my life. I mean, I was just like 25 at that stage. But I think what it did was opened up huge opportunities. And also just the keen observer in me was kind of taken further to just see why this city works the way it does. And having lived in Bombay and having spent some time in Delhi, etc., it was always exciting. So that's what I think having spent a year there, that's how I'm on this panel today. I look forward to an exciting discussion.
Katsushi, same question. Do you want to just talk a little bit about your work and how it relates to our conversation today?
Yes. Hi. My name is Katsushi Goto. I'm practicing in Mumbai since last 6 years. I'm having the small architectural design and research practice called Squareworks. Just 2 works that it's just finished in Mumbai. My practice isn't big scale work, but it's kind of realizing the small project in the historical part of Bombay. I just wanted to, so obviously I'm from Japan. I lived in Tokyo since 2000, around 2000. I'm in and out. I just wanted to show the next slide onwards that there was a discussion about already from the book that it's got the premises of the Bombay as a city and then Tokyo. maybe we can also look at the metropolitan area at large from the geographical and the topographical point of view. Tokyo has a much bigger plain, and then how that it's affected the morphology of the city development. Here it is that these are the road network that is spread around, and it's kind of, you can see that it's Bombay got a little bit of limitation because of Western Ghats that is right on the east, and but not only that, there's this little hills that it's like just after the Western Ghats towards the Arabian Sea, and where that it's Tokyo has fairly large amount of the plain. So that's also probably we can discuss during the panel discussion.
Thank you. Urmi has place of pride because she's also part of the book. The book is very dense because it has a lot of research, as it always is, and we're going to try to make this conversation as light as possible and experiential, which is why the panel is as it is. Do you want to just talk about your work?
Yeah, so along with Jasmine, we both co-founded Plural, and we are an urban design firm, and we work closely with different stakeholders in the city. So we work with the government, we work with community organizations, we work with the citizen groups, and so our interest in learning about different cities, as Jasmine had said, was to do with our work and how it works in other cities as well. So to see from there, that's how one of our research work was 6 metros. So what you see over here are the different projects that Plural is involved in. We do extensive research work. We do advocacy of various planning policies with the government as well as with the citizen groups. So we also do a lot of project work. What you just saw before was the Cuff Parade metro station, which we are working with the Cuff Parade residents, and a lot of work in our Ward A. We also do a lot of artwork as a means of collaboration with people. When you want their involvement, you have to get it tangentially. It cannot be directly asking them questions. It does not lead to the answers that you want out of it. So we do a lot of art installations with citizens. Yes, this is showing some of our ongoing works. You will see that being constructed when you drive past Machimar Nagar in Cuff Parade.
Thank you. So obviously, everyone here has operations at various scales, which is kind of important to this discussion today. Mumbai and Tokyo are very similar and very, very different all at once. So what I want to do is, I want to start with Rahul, asking him, basically what is the most striking thing that you can point out about living in Tokyo versus living in Mumbai, where you're from?
So I think if I was to see the livability index, I mean the quality of life, I think that's what hit me that in Tokyo. That I lived far away. I was in the suburbs, but the way the city was built and the way it worked like a machine was really kind of exciting to observe. And at the end of the day, the cities have to work at the street level. And I think when we compare that to Bombay, that's the one thing that we really are worried about today is how is our city working at the street level, and especially the dense areas of Parel, where we are seeing at the street level things are just falling apart. So I think great cities need that to happen. They need to work. Then you can achieve any amount of density, doesn't matter. And through this kind of study or observation of how Tokyo worked at the street level, I think there was a very interesting kind of observation that I made along with some discussions. I was working at Maki and Associates in Tokyo, so of course there was a lovely mix of architects and planners within the office, and there used to be long-drawn discussions, and they were very keen to know how Bombay worked, and I was keen to know how Tokyo worked. So I think how much time I have? I mean, I can keep rocking. Okay. So I think Tokyo, yeah. So I think, Tokyo, I think if you see it abstracted, the center is a void. And I think that's beautiful because that's the imperial palace is at the center. And then they have a loop, the Yamanote loop, which is again a government-owned railway line. And to me, every city has urban centers, it has a downtown district, but Tokyo had n number of them. And in spite of those n number of dense districts, it did not feel that crowded, or it enabled movement and mobility very easily. So what was it what they did? So I think what they did is they have this Yamanote loop, and then there are these series of nodes, which is Shibuya, Shinjuku, Ikebukuro, Nippori, Ueno, Tokyo, Shinagawa. And each one is really high dense, so, and it's a loop that the train takes an hour and 15 minutes, I think, to complete. But what it does is each of these nodes, which is controlled by the Japan Railway as a node, is then given off to a private railway who takes off from there and goes into distant suburbia. And that brings in, those are the lines that bring in people. I mean, similar things in Bombay, right? We have the Central and the Western Railway, and now a whole network of metro that's going to get in people. But how the combination of a public and a private to achieve density, achieve a good quality of life was what was exceptional. And I think when you go to districts like Shinjuku, you cannot tell which is public, which is private. It's all, you're just moving through one place from the other to the other. And I think that was what was really hit me as, wow, how have they achieved that? Yeah, so I think it was in terms of planning, they were very strong. And the railways are, we put in huge infrastructure. Every railway crossing, we'll make a huge flyover. There I lived in suburbia. The railway line is a meter gauge. It hardly takes a couple of meters width. It slices through the city. And the entire city, the suburbia, is just 6 stories, 8 stories maximum. Okay, and they've achieved high densities. So that brought me to another case. So how have they achieved those high densities staying low? And I think staying low is so important, right? So that's the next level policy decision that they did, was no ownership of car is allowed till you actually own a parking space. So before you can own a car, you have to own a parking space. Or you have to show a parking space on paper that I have a place to park off the street. It cannot be on the street. So the entire suburbia, the roads are like 4.5 meters, 4 meters wide. Only criteria being a fire engine should be able to go and an ambulance should be able to maneuver. You don't see cars on the road. What we have is our cities, half the road width is taken over by cars parked. At whose expense? At the city's expense, right? So with that, they've achieved huge density. Of course, their apartments, floor-to-floor heights are like 9 feet. All doors open outside. I used to have my toilet door opening out. It's like an airline. Everything is tight, but it works. And that achieves high density, keeping the city low. And by keeping the city low, that can really, I think the quality of life completely changes. You're connected to the ground, you're connected to green spaces, you're connected to tree canopies, and that makes so much of a difference. So I think there are 2 observations I had. I mean, we can dwell more into it as we go ahead.
I think, one part of the response to Mr. Patel's question is that people in Japan, by and large, will conform to rules. In India, we really have a difficulty doing that. I mean, everybody wants to transgress rules at various levels. So part of what he talked about works simply because people will naturally follow those rules. They maintain their private bubble even in a crowded subway line, and that's really crucial to how Tokyo works and doesn't feel overcrowded and tight like Mumbai feels sometimes. Anyways, Katsushi, you already talked about the topography of Mumbai and Tokyo, so I'm not going to go too much into that, but what I'd like you to talk about is these nodes, these central business districts, and do you see any qualitative as well as objective differences between those in Tokyo and in Mumbai?
Okay. So Rahul right now talked about this, like even suburban area, there's a height is controlled. I think it's it's based on around the station that the urban zonings are determined. So that's more close to the station, the more that the area become commercial, and then you're allowed to have more building. I do see that it's sometimes problematic because there's a huge difference in property price, that it's more closer to the station, that it's more land price become higher. And Rahul also talked about that the state node, which is usually defined as a station, is also now able to build over the station, the high density multi-story commercial complex that in fact it pulls all the population attention to the center of the, of course it's distributed throughout the Tokyo, but it's if you look at the little micro level, the center, the station always got lots of attention, where there used to be a more street-based small shops and businesses on the street going outwards towards, from the station towards more residential area, or sucked into the station business area. That's also slightly a problem. So in fact, that's like Tokyo seems as a whole, it got the multiple node, but it's also still have a problem of very, very centralized idea of organizing the planning. So that's, I think, I see the little bit of problem. So if you 5 minutes walk from the station, the neighborhoods are very, quiet, very, very quiet. If in the night, you might feel a little unsafe to walk. That sounds also a little, it's everybody laughing that, oh my God, what you're talking about. Japan must be safe. But yeah, but it's a fact is like that, that's, and there's no corner shop. Only what you can see is that a slightly busy road with the 24 hours overly lit 7-Eleven, which is also sounds a little, not part of the neighborhood. Nonetheless, the question was more large scale things.
I think you've touched upon some really important points. I mean, I think it's important what you mentioned. I mean, perception is a very big part of how we feel and engage with the city. I mean, irrespective of what the city really is. And that kind of leads me right up to you or me. What I'd like you to do is pick up like 1 or 2 important statistics from your book, from your research. Okay, now you've gone through all this elusive numbers world, so you have a handle on it, I'm sure, that you think is crucial to this discussion. What are the 2 things, let's say, from your research, 2 numbers that impact why these cities are, although being similar, divergent?
I think I will not bore people with numbers, but I will pick up 2 important points which kind of highlight the differences and the similarities between Mumbai and Tokyo. I think one of it, what Katsushi just spoke about, is the idea of informality. So Mumbai has an informal economy, and the city thrives on the informal economy. So we have our street hawkers, we have the street vendors, we have informal housing. And a lot of times we see that informality as an issue, but that is also the strength of our cities. So it is the whole idea of how do we manage this idea of informality, because the safety aspect of it. Mumbai did not feel that unsafe because of all these eyes on the streets. The idea of informality. So as planners, we want to kind of make it squeaky clean. But that's not the idea. The strengths of Mumbai are different from the strengths of Tokyo, and we need to identify what are the strengths of Mumbai. Also, talking about railway, since we were on the topic of transit, Tokyo has something very interesting. When the feeder lines are privatized, all the private line owners also own the real estate along the railway lines. So as soon as that real estate is owned by the railway line operators, then it becomes kind of imperative for them to make their particular line more interesting or more conducive for the people to ride. So the development along that railway line is also their responsibility. So you will have at the end of the line a kind of infrastructure which is expected of a railway terminus. While over here in Mumbai, what happens is that there is completely disintegrated. The land which is planned around the railway has nothing to do with the transit corridor. So Tokyo has these railway integrated communities, and there is a kind of a coordinated development of the transit and the land use along with it. So that is something that we can learn from. And also to talk about local planning, I think it is taken for granted in most of the other metropolises that your development or your density increase goes hand in hand with increase in open spaces, hand in hand with increase in amenities. So nobody talks about that. But I think in Mumbai's case, it is very important we talk about that, because in Mumbai's planning, we do not have that hand in hand. We talk about FSIs without looking at how much open space that neighborhood has. We are not looking at how do we increase the open space. We are increasing the FSIs on smallest of the plots, but there is no coordinating open space or amenities which are kind of put in place by a policy to the city. So those are maybe very basic for other metropolises, but for Mumbai, I think it's a issue that we should talk about.
Okay, so I think you touched upon this really briefly. We are going through a demographic shift in Mumbai right now. Europe, America, and a lot of the developed world, especially Japan, has already gone through that shift. It's at the tail end of that demographic shift. We are going through that. Families are becoming smaller and smaller and smaller, especially in the urban area. So you talked about this transit, and she talked about the land ownership, I think, which is really crucial. Very good example to see it without looking at the railway corridor is the Port Trust in Mumbai, which has a similar problem. So could you, Rahul, just talk a little bit about, because of your involvement also with the city of Mumbai, what do you think is, can there be like a pilot project or like an attractor project where 1 or 2 transit developments could be picked up in Mumbai and develop, where they kind of, do that lateral shift that would be required between Tokyo and Mumbai and kind of, speed along something?
Sorry. No, so I think, of course, a transit-oriented development is the way to go. But for doing that, you got to first dissuade car ownership. You got to. We are still building huge infrastructure for the car, right? In Mumbai, we are building the coastal road. I mean, we've had deficit of infrastructure, so any infrastructure is good for the city. But at the same time, if we do not prioritize it towards public mobility and do it towards private ownership, there's no way people are going to, that demographic shift to move to a public utility basis is not going to happen. In spite of our numbers already, I mean, they used to be way higher, I think, earlier, but even now, more than 80% of our population is still dependent on the public railway system. So we have that already in place. We've seen the corridors developing as they go in. It's always been the feeder routes that have been the concern, and how do they link that? The metro is supposed to be doing that, but then again, I mean, if comparing it to Tokyo, again, I spoke of the Yamanote Loop. Within the Yamanote Loop, all the Tokyo subways go underground. There's not one train you'll see above. There's only one Japan Rail line that goes overhead. So they value the city, and you can't have just everything around transportation without giving a valuable, cultural value to the city's quality of life. And I think we've lost a great opportunity when we had the metros to be done. Not taking them underground, keeping them overground is not ideal. They're just mimicking roads. We have the entire Western Express Highway and the metro above that. That makes no sense to me. You're just duplicating that. You might as well have put it underground below the road. So it's things like that that need to be thought out, I think, in transit development, and it'd be wonderful to see something like that. I don't know within Bombay, but at least we've taken so many years. Still today, BKC doesn't have a railway station, right? And it's a mess getting in and out. And those were the things that should have been put in first. So I think we've got to get our basics right, put in transport first, and then develop nodes around it. I think that would be important.
I mean, one of the things that we all need to consider is that the subsoil strata in Tokyo and Mumbai is very different. Mumbai is largely granite below a certain way. It's very hard to dig holes in Mumbai. Boston has been stuck with that great Boston dig for many, many years. New York lucked out because a lot of New York subways, basically, it's a gutter drain dug from top down, and all the streets are basically bridges over that ditch. Mumbai, because it's already densely packed, and a lot of it is high rise, we're going to have to really underpin all these foundations going. So, I mean, there is a financial and technological challenge. But yes, absolutely, point well noted. And that really is the qualitative difference between what Tokyo feels like a city and Mumbai Mumbai feels like a city. That brings me to you, right? So because you're from Japan, yes. I'm going to ask you the other question. Yeah. Do you think there's something Tokyo can learn from Mumbai? Do you think Tokyo can do something slightly differently?
Yes. So I was thinking in my head that because Rahul is talking about this railway network, and Urumi is also talking about this kind of transit-oriented development, that it's private railway network, private railway network company has taken as a developer, and while developing the railway network, that made it, I think, Tokyo town one that it's the problem of transit-oriented development, that it creates the discrepancy and the price difference of the land closer to the transportation is higher, and then as you go out, become poorer. So that is one. And Mumbai doesn't have that one, which is good. And what I think it's interesting is that it's, besides that one, Mumbai kept quite interesting the urban fabric remaining in the town, including the mill land, which is right now getting kind of redeveloped with the large development. But still, we could see the lots of mill land, which is vacant and then waiting for the development. Karvadevi area with the tight fabric, the fort area juxtaposed with the over Medan, that it's kind of creating the interesting contrast of the fabric. And then across the over Medan, we got the modern Art Deco building towards Marine Drive. That kind of juxtaposition of the completely two different urban fabric, it's very, very hard to find in Tokyo. That is something that Tokyo should have kept. I do not know how to rebuild again. The few of the left out post-World War II, the informal market still remaining, but it's not sure how long we can keep those intimate, loved by the neighborhood kind of shop and a small business area. So that's something that Tokyo could learn.
I mean, I think that's a really important point that you bring about, and this is not probably just in Tokyo. Even in Kyoto, you feel that when you go to it feels like certain areas are traditional, and you walk a block away, and it's a completely different different picture. I mean, we must, look at the 1945 marker or post-World War I marker. I mean, this globalization that was engineered to keep the dollar and the kind of keep oil prices singularly in check were important to how Japan developed, for sure. And also today, there is this desire where in India we want to, or in Southeast Asia, people want to dissociate from the dollar. Whether it's going to happen or no is a completely different discussion. But this homogenization, that you have, Japan is one very traditional, and then that which is not traditional is fairly homogenized and very American. So do you want to talk a little bit, Urmi, about how do you think, because places like he's talking about Kalba Devi and all these areas, the last thing that you can imagine is homogenization there. Can you address that a little bit?
Yeah, I think that will also bring us back to the Machizukuri that Mr. Patel started with, because the whole idea of contextual planning, even Mumbai soon will lose it, because we do not have that level of contextual planning. Your FSI cannot be the same for Kalba Devi versus your Marine Drive versus Malabar Hill versus Versova. So those are very different neighborhoods. But our planning looks at the whole city as one blanket, and we deal with only one aspect, which is FSI. And without looking at where we are building, we'll soon be following that idea of homogenization. But I think the only difference is that demographically, India is not homogeneous. And that is what has kept, even in Mumbai, you'll have many different languages. While in Tokyo, still 80 to 90% of the population will speak only one language. So there is an inherent cultural difference in terms of a very heterogeneous population in India, even at a neighborhood level. So that has kept the cultural aspect alive. But I do not know for how long. So my question again, maybe to Goto, is we would like to know more about Machizukuri, because on paper we feel that Machizukuri has what Mumbai doesn't have. The power for the local area to plan the way they feel, and it is well represented by different demographics of that neighborhood. And their suggestion is not just advisory, which in our case it is. Advisory means it is not taken heed to, it's not paid attention to by the government. So how efficient is Machizukuri in terms of actually planning the contextual areas of Japan, and is there a hope for Machizukuri further?
I will respond to the Machizukuri after I'm kind of also introducing to, or let everybody aware that Japan also has FAR, like a floor area ratio, which is the equivalent of the FSI, floor scale index. And Japan has BCL, building coverage ratio, that it's how much that you can cover your land. So it's both two that you can kind of determine that it's how many area you will get after you purchase the land, and how much you can kind of utilize. Well, that's a kind of simple mathematics or economic calculation. You pay the land and then how much you can build. But I do see sometimes that this is my point of view, and then many people feel that FSI is a kind of limitation from the city planning authority, that you can only do this much. But I do see completely opposite. It's a promises that the city making for you to invest in the land, because the city promises that if you buy this much part of the land and FSI is this much, you are promised that you can build this much. Of course, there's a multiple condition to kind of have more premium, or etc. So you have to contribute to the public, therefore that you can build more. That is have very strongly in Japan as well. In fact, it's people very, very struggling that one, and it's because of this simply become they can removing the planning authority to make any decision, but it's just kind of becoming a number game. People who buy the land promise that this much you can buy. So that's very similar to India and Japan, unlike London, where that the planning system doesn't even deploy the idea of the FSI. In terms of Machizukuri, sometimes the people have very romantic idea of the Machizukuri, that the citizen can make a decision collectively over and above what regulation is telling that it's not to do this. But the Machizukuri, in fact, is that it needs to always comprise the higher role. So the Machizukuri is kind of negotiation and an adjustment between the area, or sometimes between the government and the citizens group, that's how the better the project could be, not different, completely different. So if you don't go through the Machizukuri process, might be that it's ordinary, like a boxy building with only commercial interests may come up. But it's with the Machizukuri, there's a negotiation process that it's how to give the benefit to the surrounding and etc. But it never goes beyond what planning is, already laid down to the area. And yeah, so that's a kind of difference. There's a many good example, but it's very, very contextual. And then also, it depends on the ability of the citizens group. It's not, the citizen must be a very active and then strong. Yeah, so it's only their effort to make it slightly better.
True. I mean, even here when we are engaging with the citizen groups, they have to be active. But at least there is a systemic platform which is recognized by the city, which they are forced to recognize. While here it is more of an informal push from the citizens those who are well connected and those who are active. So a lot of other citizens do not get heard because they do not have that kind of an luxury of being active. So, I mean, that is a start for a systemic platform existing.
So in that way, that it's Machi-zukuri is recognized by the local authority to register and then participate. So there's already platform is created, not the there's a prescribed solution, but it's platform to put the stakeholders together. You can think about that way, yes.
I think this negotiation platform is a great way to look at it. I mean, to negotiate between, to try to arrive at a solution that is not just a box. I think it's half after, and maybe we should throw this conversation open to the audience. Any questions? Well, we have one.
So, the conversation was quite about physical components of both the cities. I would like to attract attention towards, and specifically when we are talking about local level plannings, is that all throughout the research which authors have conducted for writing this book, have they compared the overall human resource engaged in planning between these two cities? Because and this is my question, primary question, and which from my own experience of planning at least two greenfield cities, Lavasa and Amravati in Andhra Pradesh, is that it's not just that we are not planning good enough or we're not planning better, we are not planning, just simply not planning enough. And then we also see a person like Ananya Roy, who is telling us that perhaps planning need to be further deregulated. And that's where the importance of informal has been highlighted. So my key question is that, has this been compared, that how many people, what is the human resource which is involved in both the cities, and what is the learning from, if there is any difference between that? Thank you very much.
So I'll answer. Human resources, what we have compared is the entire governance structure. Because most of these metropolises have a systemic platform where there is either a planning commission, which is independent of the bureaucracy and the political aspect of it, so that there is a platform from where the professionals can engage in city planning. The number of people will of course differ depending on how big the metropolis is and how populated it is, and on various other aspects. So I don't think the numbers are as much important as the fact that there is a system in place for the professionals to engage. Today, if architects or urban designers or planners, if they want to engage with the city at any scale, there is no systemic platform. So there is no ways for a profession to be engaged by the government. The government cannot directly engage a professional to design even a street. So those kind of basic systems are not in place in Indian cities, and that is where I think the main difference lies. So to talk about the governance structures and the planning, the way the planning happens is the key.
I think one of the other things to also add is that in addition to planning, there are other fields. Like, so there is urban design and, as she said, architecture. And I don't think that in addition to planning, urban design and architecture also needs to be taken in. So yes, I think it's not enough just to plan. I think it has to be, yeah, it has to be a comprehensive exercise for sure. Any other question? I saw a hand in the back there. Mike, last row.
Thank you. Hi, thanks for the discussion. I'm just curious what the panel thinks. How big a role or a contributing factor was the fact that Tokyo got a chance to rebuild itself again and again through, natural calamities, world wars, all these, large-scale disruptive events? It's in the context of when I hear a view that says things have to be much worse before they become better. Is it just incrementally, our legacy coming in the way, or did that play a massive role in terms of how well planning was undertaken?
I had this urge of asking Goto before the panel discussion also, but I'm glad that you picked it up. So Tokyo also kind of rebuilds itself every 30 years. Is that something which has now become so habitual, or is it precautionary? Because the material shift has happened long back. So we're quite curious to know. And the timeline did highlight that, Mumbai needs more calamities to kind of shape up from Tokyo. But I think our resilience is in informality, and that's where we have rooted ourselves. And if that would not have been allowed to be tolerated, like in Hong Kong and Tokyo both, there is a policy for toleration, So here we are inherently tolerant. So that's why the rapid building happens there. But my question for 30 years, along with his, coupled.
Okay, I will answer to this question with a mix of my own point of view and keeping in mind that the author of this book interested in the machizukuri. So all this construction after the disaster, or using the idea of Olympic or event, what I call it event-led. Now again, that's Osaka trying and do it with exposition coming up, I don't know, 2025 or something. Yeah. I think it's a little bit of problematic, and it's arbitrary and very reactionary, and it's become not democratic, especially that it's during the time of Tokyo Olympic, 2020 Tokyo Olympic. All the public building needs to be built, invested for the game, was procured by the model of design build. That means that it's design of the building and contractor appointed and then procured together. So there's no mechanism that checks the public money is being utilized properly according to the design that it's city ambitioned, and then how delivered by the contractor. So there's the public building supposed to be separating the design and then construction to make sure that there's a checking system works because it's public money involved. Very similarly, that it's the event-led or the reaction to the disaster is that it's without going through the much of public debate, because of urgency, the state or authority make a decision. So I think the Tokyo or even Japan at whole needs to look at that whole process of event-led, which sounds like 20th century method to kind of kickstart something. But we need to kind of look at that one in a very different way, that it's continuous development involving the multiple stakeholder. So that's my point of view.
I don't know if it's a very cultural thing. I think in Japanese culture, their Ise shrine, which is among the most sacred shrines, gets rebuilt every 20 years in exactly the same way. And I think as a culture, they are accepting that, the first thing in any project, even when we are doing the BR Museum, the first thing that Mr. Maki asked me was, what's the lifespan of the building? So you start from there. So if you have a lifespan of 100 years, you use XYZ materials. If you have a lifespan of 50 years, you use the next materials. And most of the housing that I used to live in suburbia were a lot still made with timber, with traditional timber craftsmen. A timber building has a lifespan of 20 years. So I think it's in their culture to get things, something is not permanent. And that came about right from when you look back at most of their shrines are rebuilt. Even the Meiji shrine is continuously rebuilt. So culturally, they are accepting that there is a change. I think you can't say the same for places like us, especially when you see those ownership and rental numbers. When something is owned, it's not going to be that easy to kind of get a consensus on getting it demolished or getting new. So something new like that. So I think it's a cultural thing, but I'm not sure if this 30 years now with concrete and the new buildings, it's still there. I don't know if it's Tokyo, but if you travel in the countryside, I think 90% of the houses are still being made in timber. And the huge population does stay there as well. So I mean, I'm not sure I answered the question, but I feel it's a very cultural issue that they are accepting change.
I can also tell that it's culturally that Japanese people also kind of follows the authority says as well, and that Japanese people may not really require the transparency in the process, but it just expects the end result to be a better. That's a little different things, because if you give the decision making, another side, and that trust that they will make better, and that's a good, but I mean, it's questionable because we also need to participate. Yeah. I think that's a time that.
So I think just talking of this culture, one more aspect that came, I mean, I was there in 98, 99, so that's 30 years ago. And India was a very different economy at that time. Japan was a different economy. But the acceptance of technology in their daily lives was tremendous. Now India is, I think, reaching there. So we are on the cusp of a revolution, which we are going through. But at that time, like I mentioned, railway lines cutting through urban fabric and not having flyovers, just street crossings, a level crossing, literally a train passes by, within 20 seconds the level crossing goes up, people cross, their lasers across, a train is coming, you see it coming and the level crossing will come down, they'll rely on their lasers and everybody will follow rules. So I think their reliance on technology was tremendous, and they trusted it. And to a certain extent, I think they've used technology to their advantage now. I think we are right there, and it'll be interesting to see how technology has permeated to Ate. They had 100% literacy at that time. I mean, 99, I would say, and our numbers were way off, but our numbers are lifting continuously. So I think that brings us to an important talk on where India would be headed if we get our technology and literacy levels high. Can we achieve an urbanity that's different?
Okay, I think Katsushi has a great idea. What he's saying is, let's listen to 2-3 questions and then address them together. So can you get us your question?
Yep. So as an architect, the development that happens for a plot or any land parcel in the city happens in sort of like an isolation. You do a general contextual study, but then you just run through it into just rely on FSI. My question was, are there urban planners or resources who guide area developments, who audit and actually evaluate architectural proposals before they get sent, go progress?
Yeah, I have a question. So just from the learnings between these two cities, obviously this is addressed specifically for Mumbai. Is there anything that we can do as general citizens who have an interest in the city to not lose our neighborhoods or to get more involved, to get to that kind of district level? I've seen it happen in some parts, but it's generally the few. So is there something we can do?
So it was interesting how we spoke about the 30 years, every 30 years that the Tokyo redevelops, right? My question here comes from a citizen of Mumbai, where in 30 years you'll barely see a flyover come up, right? So if we get destroyed, do we come up in 30 years, or we are still working with the bureaucracy? So my question is actually based on the kind of research that you do, that how do you compare this? Here we are waiting for the infrastructure to develop and, quarter of our life is gone and we are not able to enjoy it. While in 30 years, the whole city is rebuilt, So I think that's a big starking difference right there. And do you bring that to the table when you do the research?
Yeah, Japan built an airport in the sea. So they change. In 30 years, it's going to go down in the sea. So they are ready for such a change also. Here, 25 years, you don't see even the airport coming up. So the point is the same. But the point is that are you ready when Mumbai and Tokyo will become Venice? Are you ready for that planning when you are sitting and discussing this?
So it might be my question is different, but my question about real planning's perspectives. So if you know about in Gautam Bhan, the Gautam Bhan talk about in slums development planning. He says our the perspective about in slums development, it's a very bad perspective. We think the slums are not developed. But if you go to slums and we see, and we provide to the slums the basic amenities, water, electricity, sanitization, and roads. So the slum people develop their own slum houses, the design of the place, how they use to the slums, the small places for developments. So it's type of the perspective about in slum peoples. But the another perspective about in neoliberal perspective about in developments. So these two perspectives is very contradicting. So my question about in these two perspectives, where will you stand and how you look about the development about Mumbai? Because now they started to the slum demolition, many things we see Dharavis.
Okay, I think I think
how you look about that two perspectives and where you stand.
Okay, so I think I'm just going to have to cut you short because of time. I think that's a homogenization question somehow. These two questions are audit questions to get public participation, citizen participation, let's call it. And these two questions are the 30-year questions. So who wants to answer it? Go for it.
Okay, I'll just answer all three one by one. I think the entire idea of contextual development that first you spoke about. So there, in Indian cities, there is no system of audit. But there are many metropolises where the audit, not for the private projects, but for public projects, there is an entire process of public hearing, which is not just a lip service. So there is a kind of an audit by the citizens for the public projects that are coming within the neighborhood. I think almost all the cities are struggling with the contextual policies, but a lot of cities have managed to include it within their planning regulations, this contextualization of policies. Mumbai is way far ahead, I mean, way far behind when we talk about contextual policies. And citizens' involvement is possible even in Mumbai. So a lot of citizens associations are quite active, and because thanks to the social media, local governance is forced to look at the citizens' demand if it comes as a collective effort. So of course, individual, not in my backyard idea of just few citizens coming together and saying, okay, I don't want this in my backyard, doesn't work. So it has to be a kind of a collective group which where different economic groups are speaking together for a certain development. Definitely the government listens to that. But so these are the informal gaps that Mumbaikars have to fill, and social media is there for to give face to these kind of efforts. So that is the citizens' involvement currently in Mumbai, in absence of a formal mechanism. I think to answer the idea of in 30 years whether Mumbai will ever rebuild itself, I think the question that the whole idea is that it is not to compare two cities apples to apples, because it will never happen. The cultural values are very different. As Goto said, that the whole idea of a Japanese population is to listen to the authority, of the conformity and trust in an authority that whatever they are doing is for the public good. While the Indian population, the entire cultural value is very different, and the way we look at development and progress is very different. We can go into a separate debate whether it is good or bad. Yes, we see a lot of delays of development, but at the same time we are taking care of the heterogeneous population which is there in the city. It's not that we just overnight get rid of an entire area just because we want to have a certain highway or a certain transit corridor being put in place. So in a way, maybe slow development is good for different kind of population. So I think we should not be hasty in judging the speed of development as good or bad.
I think that sort of answers the homogenization question also, right? I think
of citizens' involvement, your question is also that most of the cities which we have studied in the book, there is representation through elections, which means that your voice is being conveyed much ahead, and it is the mayor or the governor who is there, which is the entire chain is through an elective process. But here, that is not in place. Here, if you see the book outside, you will see that the loop is very localized at the ward level, where you can just make suggestions, and it is a very voluntary thing. But the systemic change, the platform is not there, as we have been discussing. If that platform is there, the onus of who volunteers to do the work is not there, because you're being guided through the system. Right now, the onus is on people to volunteer themselves, and that is something which is purely driven from how much hunger you have in your belly.
I think learning from Mr. Patel's question of how we can, what is that system of, I don't know the Japanese word, but of public participation. I think the word negotiation is important, we all do that, but of deciding that that negotiated solution or whatever decision is above the general law. I think even if we can at a policy level say that your ward level decision will overrule the general decision, would be then give it more power. And I think it's a question of prioritizing that the local vote should be above the general vote. And if that could be possible, I think there is a possibility to get better community participation into the process.
Someone asked about calamities and whether Tokyo's calamities by way of earthquakes made it easier to redevelop sensibly. I'd just like to say that calamities are not necessarily natural. They're also man-made. And I think it's the man-made calamities like the milllands or the coastal roads that citizens can get involved in and perhaps, mitigate.
On that very positive note. Well, thank you so much for a wonderful conversation. When we first learned about this project, when we met Jasmine and Urmi through actually Makran Narvekar, and he, Oh, that's the second time. Okay, through Manjeet Kriplani. Okay, no, actually, yeah. And he suggested they're doing some great work, and I was in this Japanese state of mind because I was following Rahul's work with the Bihar Museum, and Goto had just won his award for his work on Tark, and I was very fascinated with this Japan and architecture thing, and I was thinking of something to do with it, and then we found these books that were launched. And we said, okay, I'm only going to do Japan. But after today's conversation, I think I have to tackle the other cities also. And in fact, today I was reading an article in the New York Times about Penn Station not Penn Station, actually, Madison Square Garden being rebuilt, and which has blocked some of the iconic skyline views of the Empire State Building for many people. And I was sitting and I wanted to ask a question about what happens to the skyline of cities, because right now most of these cities skylines are looking the same. The buildings that are coming up are the same. And I was talking to Jasmine on the side and talking about art cities, smart cities, and that's what we do, is how do you account for this? How do you account for spaces to create, promote, and develop art, not just for the sake of making feel good, but we all know how important that is. So there are many questions I have unanswered, so definitely going to be doing another session. Thank you to Jasmine, Rahul, Goto, and Urmi for your wonderful remarks. Chaitanya, I mean, this guy is one of the best moderators I have worked with in a long time. Generally, we are chasing our moderators for all our Avid sessions. This guy was chasing us, so it's a good sign. And thank you to our partners, the NGMA, to Nazneen Ji and Shruti for hosting us. And thank you for being such a great audience and being in such great numbers. We at Avid have many exciting programs coming up in November. On the 4th, as you all have been following some of the work we do, I've got a bit of an AI obsession lately, so does the rest of the world. We just finished a workshop on design thinking and AI, but we have a workshop on writing in the age of AI, where text meets tech. With the co-founder of the Himalayan Writers Retreat, Chetan Mahajan. That's going to be on the 4th of November. We're also going to look at, from a Bombay perspective, we're going to be celebrating Raja Ravi Varma's Bombay's connection with the launch of a book at the Pandole Art Gallery, and many more. Just, stalk us on social media or check out our website. Thank you once again for being here, and have a wonderful evening. Thank you.